people of the YouTube world and all who are watching this. I am Mackenzie901K. Y'all, it has been a pretty good couple of reading months. I think that for the most part, this year might be the year that we actually do hit 100 books. Me saying that in April, and I've read currently in total 36 books. It may be the year that we hit 100 reads, and crossing my fingers that we do, because that would be so fun. But anyway, let's get into the point of today's video. Today I've got 20 books for you guys that I have read in the past 2 months, so March and April. Let me tell you all something. There's some fun reads in this stack. We have a few 5 stars, we have a reread, 2 rereads, and we have a fun series that I have mostly finished. So I think we should go ahead and get right on into the books because there is quite a few. Starting off with the first book that we have, and that is You with a View. I don't actually have a physical copy of this book. This book I did read on my Kindle. I don't know how I feel about this book, because part of me really enjoyed it, but the other part of me just kind of found it meh. And also, if you guys want to read these synopsises, I'm going to be going into some synopsis. I'm going to be jumping around a little bit, so I may not go into all of these synopsises, but they will be right here on the screen if you guys want to read them. But You with a View, pretty much, it was an interesting read. It was my first read by this author. I had really high expectations about this book because so many people love this author. I don't know if this author is going to be for me. So the thing that I really loved about this book though is I really loved the main character, like the girl main character. She was phenomenal. I really loved the fact that she was a photographer and she just refound her love for photography throughout the book. I also really liked the grandfather of the guy in the book. His name was Paul. He was so fun. I loved hearing about the story of how him and her grandmother kind of met and their whole little thing. It was just so cute, and the road trip was so fun and interesting. I will say this book is very unique because I've never really read a book where they kind of go on a road trip and they do all of these things, and I just thought that was really fun and unique. And this book did have me like sobbing a little bit, and I don't know why, because it was a really happy book, and it really dealt with the topic of grief very well. My only issue with this book was honestly the romance. I just didn't really vibe with the romance. It was like a rivals to lovers type of thing, or like an old rivals to lovers. I wasn't rooting for them, even though I do love both of the characters individually. The girl main character more so than the guy main character. It wasn't a memorable read. I literally had to look up the synopsis because it just wasn't a book that just stood out to me, and I'm really sad because so many people love that book, but I did end up giving it a 3.75 star, so almost a 4 star, not quite. I did, however, get an arc of Jessica Joyce's new book, X-Files. I'm planning on reading it hopefully this month. I will keep you all updated on my thoughts on X-Files because I'm hoping it'll be better. The next book that I have though is such a fun read, and that is Swift and Saddled by Lila Sage. This book it's really like the Chestnut Springs series, but in a different font. I ate this book up. I read this book in one sitting and it was so good. The characters, I am a character girly. As I'm learning what sparks really good books for me, it's the characters. It always has to be the characters. Alda was just such an interesting character. She was a really I know what I want type of character, and it was like pretty much a reverse Grumpy Sunshine, honestly. Watching their love story like come together was so fun. Wes, he is one of my favorite characters. I think Lila Sage really knows how to write a male main character, especially between him and Luke. Between these two guys, Lila Sage really knows how to write a male main character. And the nicknames, while they are so cringy, they are just so funny to me. I love the cowboy, like the cowboys, just they get me every single time. So I did end up giving this book a 4.5 star. Not super duper memorable, but was such a fun time, and I love the fact that I could just fly through it, and it really helped get me out of a reading slump, because believe it or not, at the beginning of March I was in a huge reading slump, and it was taking me forever to get through books, but this book really helped. The next two books I want to talk about is a duology, and that is Six Crimson Cranes and The Dragon's Promise. This is the Six Crimson Crane duology. I don't think there's a special name for it, but I loved these books. More specifically this one for the whimsy of it all. This book quite literally felt like you were in a Ghibli movie, and I was eating it up. So our main character, Shori, I love her. She was so fun. Shori just really didn't want to step into this role of becoming a wife so early on. I believe she was 17 or 18 in this book. She was getting married off. That's kind of where the book begins. She was getting married off, and she didn't want to. So she ends up falling into a river, and this dragon ends up coming to save her. And then something happens with Shori's stepmother, and her stepmother pretty much curses her and her whole family and turns them all into cranes, all of her brothers, hence the name Six Crimson Cranes, and they have little crimson crowns on their heads. And that's kind of where the story goes. You follow Shori as she's trying to break this curse. She ends up having a bowl on her head because of this curse as well, so no one can see her face, no one knows who she is, and it was such an interesting story. I love this book for the whimsy. The vibes this book gives is just immaculate. It's so interesting to read about this Shori and then to read about this Shori, because they're very different, and just her character development throughout this entire series is so good. And the ending of The Dragon's Promise, oh, I was sobbing, confused, distraught a little bit about how the book ended, because the book ended in a way that I was not expecting, but it was so good. And I ended up giving this duology, I gave Six Crimson Cranes and The Dragon's Promise both 4 stars. I love these books. I think that they are so pretty and perfect and so cute. My only complaint with them was how the story was pretty much told. It was told really slow, and it took me a while to get into the books, and I feel like this one was a little bit of a faster paced book than The Dragon's Promise, but overall they were just such slow books, and it devastated me how slow they were, because if the pacing would have just picked up just a little bit, these books I feel like could have easily been 5 stars. Easily. Next up we have A Curious Beginning by Deanna Raybourn. This is the first book in the Veronica Speedwell mystery series. This was a Katie recommendation. She has some excellent book recommendations. Pretty much this follows Veronica after she just finds out that her, I believe it was her aunt, has passed, and she pretty much has to go through this journey because after the funeral this guy shows up and doesn't really try to kill her. He just breaks in and is like, hey, I'm here, and then leaves. So she has to pretty much figure out why this guy broke into her house, or well, broke into her aunt's house. And then along the way she meets this guy named Stoker, and Stoker is going to be such an interesting character. I feel it in my bones that Stoker is going to be one of my favorite book men of all time, just because the wittiness and the banter between these two is just so fun. I wasn't really here for the mystery of it all. Like, the mystery was fun and cool. I didn't really loved the pacing, and I just didn't really love the mystery. Like, the mystery was fun and interesting. It just wasn't like I was reading it for the mystery. I was reading it for Veronica and Stoker to see what in the world Katie is talking about when it comes to these two. And honestly, I cannot wait to pick up the second one. I haven't picked up the second one yet, and I need to. This series though is just a super duper long series, so I don't necessarily know when I'll get to pick it up. I think it's gonna be such a fun little series, and I'm obsessed. Katie, you have got me hooked on the Veronica Speedwell mystery series. Next up, we have such a odd read. So this book is called Rose Tinted Lenses. I seen a TikTok about a certain section of this book, and I was intrigued and I was hooked from there. Kendall in this book was such a strange main character. It's not really a book that's like anything fantastic. It is quite literally just a fun romance, and that is what this book has going for it, is that it is just a fun romance. But I did end up actually really enjoying this book, so I did end up giving this book a 3.5 star. It was memorable, just wasn't what I want in a book. Next up, and the final book that I read in March was The Bridge Kingdom by Daniel L. Jensen. I don't know what was going through my head when I was reading this book, but for some reason, I just could not like this book. And I don't know why, because this book has every single element that I would enjoy in a book. It's enemies to lovers. It's I've got a mission and I'm not going to tell you about it because it's going to be your downfall. It had everything that I could have wanted in a book. But I ended up giving this book a 3.5 star. I don't know. I wish somebody could explain to me why I gave this book a 3.5 star, because I genuinely don't know. I found myself just wanting to skim through it, and the last little bit of this book, I really enjoyed the last little bit of this book. I wasn't really like rooting for them as a couple per se. Like, I did find them interesting, but I wasn't rooting for them. Like, I thought it was gonna be fun, I thought it was gonna be good, but I ended up giving this book a 3.5 star. I don't know why. I truly do not know why. And that's my thoughts on this book. Moving on. Now we're moving on to what I read in April, and April was such a fun reading month. I think these are the books that, one, stuck with me the most. I guess it's technically because we're freshly out of that month, but two, these were the funnest reads. First up, we have The Crimson Moth, aka The Heartless Hunter. It is called The Heartless Hunter here in the US, but I'm gonna keep calling it The Crimson Moth because honestly that kind of sounds a little bit more fun than The Heartless Hunter in my opinion. This is the Fairy Loot Special Edition. It's beautiful. This book blew me away, and it took me a while because I was also originally, after I finished The Bridge Kingdom, I started another fantasy book, and it was called The Song of the Forever Rains, and I just couldn't get into that book either, and I don't know what was happening to me. I just could not get into a book, and I'm like, is it me? Am I just like hating all books that I read now, or is it the books? It was the books. This book is proof that it was the books. I loved Rune. Rune was such a fun main character. Any book with a vigilante in it, eating it up. I'm eating it up because I love superheroes. I'm a super nerd. It just gave me the vibes of Powerless and Renegades combined, but also the vibes of season 1 and 2 of The Arrow, which is like a DC show, and that's what this book was to me. My only complaint, I have one, and my only complaint is that we didn't get enough of the Crimson Moth. So Rune is pretty much this by day socialite, by night the Crimson Moth, this vigilante who is saving the witches from being burned at the stake. It's so interesting to see her twist her lies and things like that because she herself is a witch. And then Gideon very much gave me Kai vibes. The reason I'm comparing this to Powerless is because Gideon doesn't know that she's a witch, but Gideon is like the head witch hunter. She decides that she needs to infiltrate Gideon in order to figure out where they're keeping this other witch that would have like all the knowledge and power that she needs to get. And overall, this book was a 5-star because I have not stopped thinking about this book since I've read it. And I am so excited and so sad that the second book comes out in January of next year. Like, that is so far away. I need the second book ASAP. Overall, this book was just so fun, but my only complaint is that we did not get enough of the Crimson Moth. We needed more. I needed more of the Crimson Moth. If you have not read The Heartless Hunter or the Crimson Moth, depending on where you are in the world, you need to pick it up. It is so fun, especially if you love Powerless. It's so good. I just wish we would have gotten more of the Crimson Moth. That did not knock it though from not being a 5-star, because it was so good and so fun. I just hope that we get more of the Crimson Moth in the next book. Okay, so next up I read a fun book that I am quite intrigued to finish the series. That is A Broken Blade by Melissa Blair. This is the first book in the Halfling saga. I originally found out about this book on Book Talk. It was trending a few years ago. I think it was in 2022 when it was trending. Melissa Blair, marketing genius for this book, she marketed it as an anonymous author, and throughout this book you had to figure out who the author was. Well, by now we do already know who the author is, and we know that it is Melissa Blair, but that was such a genius marketing scheme. And I originally bought this book when it had the written by anonymous title. I owned it on Kindle, but I never owned a physical copy. But anyway, this book was so good. It is Throne of Glass coded. Honestly, I hate comparing books like that because, you know, Throne of Glass is such a popular book series, and a lot of books are going to compare to Throne of Glass, but this book just really gave Throne of Glass. Kira's pretty much like the King's Blade. She has to go and assassinate people for the king. She pretty much is battling this guy named the Shadow, and the Shadow is just like this guy who's just cloaked and tangoing with her, you know, wherever they can. So she is tasked to hunt down the Shadow and end him, but along the way discovers that the Shadow may actually not be her enemy. It is Celaena Sardothien coded. Kira and Celaena would be biffles. Like, they would be besties for life. I love this main character, honestly, as much as I love Celaena. And I love this book, and I cannot wait to read the second book in this series. It's going to be so good and so fun, and Melissa Blair is a very talented author. I'm going to say it like this. If you like Throne of Glass, pick up this book. Do not take it as a exact carbon copy of Throne of Glass, because it's not. It's its own story. It has its own plot. It has its own characters that are different. The main character is just Celaena Sardothien coded, and if you've read Throne of Glass and you're looking for something that is similar to Throne of Glass, here you go. Then I decided that I've been reading a lot of fantasy, so I went to pick up a romance, and I picked up Happily Never After by Lynn Painter. I found a girl on YouTube, and I don't know her name, but I'm going to put her channel up here. She is so fun. She gave this book, I believe, like a 4. I'm not really sure what she gave it exactly, but I know it was a high rating, and I was really intrigued by this book because she spoke volumes about it. So pretty much Sophie and Max are the objectors. They go to these weddings and they object. They're like, I object, you can't get married today. They do this for friends. They get paid to do this, which is such a fun concept and so interesting. I could not imagine paying somebody to object at a wedding, but apparently it could potentially be a thing. So Max originally objects at Sophie's wedding, and then they come back together, and Sophie's like, I want to do that too. So they go on this whole journey of being objectors together. And while I thought the premise of this book was so fun, the characters were not it. I didn't like Max. Sophie was okay. I didn't really find anything special about this book. It was short, it was sweet, it was to the point. I wasn't really rooting for them as a couple because they pretty much go through the whole book being like, I hate love and I want nothing to do with love. love. Max is like, yeah. In my opinion, he really didn't actually feel that way. He was just doing that because he likes Sophie. But that's kind of the whole mindset they go through throughout the book is I hate love. And I feel like in the end, Sophie really just didn't want to be with Max. And that sucks because this was my first Lynn Painter book. And I wanted to love Lynn Painter as much as Haley Pham loves Lynn Painter. So I'm going to give Better Than the Movies a try at some point. But this book, it just was not doing it for me. I gave it a 3.25 star. And I think the only thing that kept me from giving it like a 2.75 star was the end. The end was fun. It resolved fun. And the premise. The premise was good. I really liked the objector premise. But overall, this book just was not it. Unpopular opinion probably, but that's just kind of how I feel about it. I think I talked about this in my last video. I read Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson again, and I absolutely adored it. I don't know what happened to me when I first read this book, but I just didn't love it. I think originally I wanted to give it like a 3 star, and then I bumped it up to like a 4 or something because I did still really like it the first time around. I fell in love with the characters, but this time I fell in love with the characters. Nathaniel is so witty, and how did I miss that? Because witty characters are my jam. I love it when a character can clap back just as fast as the other character can. And like, how did I miss that? My first read. How are you gonna sit there and tell me that I missed that? I loved him. I will say though, we didn't get a lot of romance in this book, which this book is not really romance heavy. It's more plot focused, and I still really loved the plot. I thought the plot was interesting. Elizabeth is such a fun character. I love her willingness to figure out what happened to her library because it was her home. Like that library and the director at her library, it was her home. It was all she had ever known. And then she was ripped away from that because she got accused of doing something that she doesn't actually do. And then she has to go on this whole journey to figure out what actually happened and how can she prove her innocence. And along the way, she meets Nathaniel and she meets Silas, and I absolutely love them. I reread this book and I gave it a 4.75 star. It was so good. It was so fun. And the dark undertone that originally pushed me away from this book, I loved it. I ate it up. So this is your sign. If you ever have a book that you really feel like you may potentially one day love it, this is your sign to go reread it, because I originally didn't love this book. Now look at me, it's almost a 5-star read. It's not quite a 5-star read. Like, I still have some issues with the pacing, but overall, this was such a fun book, and I will cherish this book forever. And then we are going to talk about the little novella that comes after it, because I did want to go ahead and pick this up. This is The Mysteries of Thorn Manor. Not really as intrigued by this book. I didn't give this book a rating just because it is a novella, and if I don't love a novella, if I don't give it honestly a 4.5 or higher, I don't really want to give it a rating because it's a novella and they're not super duper fleshed out anyway to begin with. So this book just pretty much follows the aftermath of what happens in this book. We get to see more of Silas and Nathaniel and Elizabeth just going through life. Some things have changed and they just have to deal with the aftermath, and that's what this book is. It's just pretty much like an extended epilogue of what happens to Elizabeth and Nathaniel and their adventures after what happened at the end of the book. And also, this little novella is so teeny tiny. It is so little and it is so cute, but don't get me wrong, it does get on my nerves that it is half of a normal size book. Anyway, next book is Wild Love by Elsie Silver. Elsie Silver just really knows how to write a book, and she really knows how to keep you entertained. I really love this book, but it's not a 5-star read. I've seen Destiny give this book a 5-star read, and Destiny never gives 5-star reads. So I really did some self-evaluating of what I thought about this book, and I still really settle myself with the 4.25 star that I gave it. Don't get me wrong, this book was so fun and so good. I really love the Chestnut Springs series so much more. This follows Willa, who is in the second book, who is Cade's love interest. This follows her brother. Ford is the world's hottest billionaire. He comes face to face with with his daughter that he never knew that he had. And he has to take care of her because her mother is going through such a hard time mentally. I need to start reading more books with little kids. Every time I hear about a pregnancy trope or a little kid, I just am instantly like, I don't want to read that book ever. But honestly, this one kind of slapped. The love interest, Rosie, is coming from working in this toxic environment, kind of with a guy that's just like, I really don't care about you, but I'm still gonna act like I love you anyway. And she deserved to be loved. So she goes and she moves back out to where her family is from, and Ford, they're childhood friends for sure, and Ford always had like a little crush on her, but she was kind of off limits because it is like a brother's best friend type of vibe. I loved it. I loved being back with Elsie Silver's writing. I still felt like we were in the Chestnut Springs world, and it felt like coming back home. And Elsie Silver's writing is just so fun, and her characters are so good, and the men are perfection. And I love this book, and I cannot wait to read book 2 in the series. Next up, we have finally the books that turned my life upside down, and that is the rest of the ACOTAR series. Finally, I can tell you all that I have mostly finished the ACOTAR series. I'm still reading Silver Flames. I don't know when I'm gonna finish it because this series tore me apart. So let's start with A Court of Mist and Fury. I can't really go into a synopsis with these, so you're just gonna have to bear with me, but I just want to tell you guys that this book is still a 6 out of 5 stars, and I love it, and I will forever love this book. And I don't think there will be a day where I don't love this book and recommend it, because it is so good. If you all have never read the ACOTAR series before, this is your sign. It is a very hyped up series, and I know hyped up series can be intimidating. They are so worth it, and they are so good and so fun, and I cannot recommend them enough. So this book, we are following Feyre in the aftermath of book 1. Feyre's going through some stuff. She's going through some issues. She gets whisked away to this other court, and she meets these people, and she gets involved in this inner circle, and I just love them all so much. Like, this book, when I picked this book up again, I felt like I was returning back to my home. We end off with this book, so good, so fun. This book is very romance heavy. Then we get into Wings and Ruin, and Wings and Ruin is not a 6-star read. It is a 5-star read though. But I do still love it for, you know, just the vibes of the characters, and the characters just, you know, going through a tough time but still finding ways to lighten the mood. That is what this book is. That is what this book does, and I am obsessed. The ending of this ripped me to shreds and then put me back together, made me whole. I just loved it, and this was a beautiful conclusion to just following Feyre. Then we jump into Frost and Starlight, and Frost and Starlight was, I gave it a 4.5 stars. It was such a fun novella. I just felt like it was a little bit boring just because it was just kind of throwing a bunch of stuff in there all at once, and there wasn't really a plot to it. I still loved this though, and I still thought that this was such a fun book because we get to look into other characters' point of views that we would have never gotten to look into. My biggest issue with this book is it switches from first person while we're with Rhysand and Feyre to third person and the other characters' point of views, and I'm just like, why? Why couldn't it just all have been in first person? I didn't really understand the switch. I guess it's to get you used to the switch in Silver Flames, because Silver Flames is in third person, and I'm not really sure how I feel about that either. I don't really love third person point of view. It's not something that I go for. I normally go for the books that are in first person point of view. But this book, don't get me wrong, still beautiful, still fun, and I loved it so much. So, while reading ACOTAR and screaming and squealing about ACOTAR and how much I love that series so much, and it is one of those series that just grabs you and it just won't let you go, and I am so in the fandom now, and I'm more in the fandom than I've ever been in my life, and I love that for me. I was also listening to Crown of Midnight on audio, and that was the most random thing I think I've ever done in my life, listening to 2 of Sarah J Maas books. Well, listening to one of her books and also reading the ACOTAR series was so interesting and so fun, and I don't know how I kept them separate. This book was gut-wrenching. I loved it though. I loved it. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 star initially, but now I kind of want to bump it up to like a 4.5 because I think this is my favorite book in the series, because we get to go from seeing Celaena from being this happy, well, not really happy, I wouldn't necessarily say Celaena was happy, but in a better mindset than when she was when we first met her in Throne of Glass. We get to see her go through some things with some of the main characters, and we get to see some relationships evolve. But that being said, the next half of this book is gut-wrenching, and it tears you apart and it makes you sob. But I think so far, between Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight, I think Crown of Midnight might be my favorite for the character development. Throne of Glass is definitely my favorite for the plot. Also, right now I'm reading Heir of Fire, just in case anybody wants to know. I had to jump straight into it. I know I need to read The Assassin's Blade, but I don't know if I want to. I know we get a lot more background, I think, about Celaena. I'm not 100% sure on that. I think I'm going to have a hard time with that. And I'm especially going to have a hard time doing the tandem read, because I've been doing nothing but listening to these books on audio. Well, I guess I could still tandem listen to books. We'll figure that out when we get there, but so far I'm having such a fun time with this series, and I think in Heir of Fire it's gonna go down, and Heir of Fire might be my favorite just with the way it's already going. We're already learning so much so quickly. I feel like it's gonna be my favorite. TBD. Then after Crown of Midnight, I read Powerful. Powerful, first of all, I annotated it. My goodness, did this book tear me up. I was tore all to pieces. The first little bit of this book, with any Lauren Roberts book, I feel like her writing style is gonna be slow in the beginning, and then it's gonna pick up. So the first, like, I would say 10% of this book was pretty slow. We were learning about Adina and how her and Paedon become besties, and we kind of get a little bit of background about them. It cuts right to when Paedon is leaving for the trials in Powerless. So then we go ahead and we follow Adina and what she's up to while Paedon is off at these trials. And Adina she's doing okay. She's going through a little bit of a hard time without Paedon, but she's doing okay. And then she meets this guy named Mac, and Mac quite literally turns her life around upside down, left and right. I love him. He and Kai are so fun. To begin with, I didn't really have attachment to Dina, but after going through this, I gained a lot of attachment to her, and she was my sweet little wholesome girl. By the end of this book, I was in tears. The quotes in this book kill me. Literally just the dedication. It says to the girls with softer dreams, your purpose is just as powerful. Like, from the synopsis, I was in tears. I gave this book a 5-star. It's not a 6-star read like Powerless, but it is a 5-star novella, and this is honestly one of the best novellas I think I've ever read. Lauren Roberts just does it again, and I'm so impressed with Powerful. I'm so impressed, and I'm so in love, and I'm so hurt by this book. Now I'm just anxiously waiting for Reckless, because I have a theory about a certain character in here and another certain character. And if you know, do you have this theory too? I really am curious if anybody else has this theory, because of the connections that are made. I'm just really intrigued, and that's all I'm gonna say before I get into spoilers. But Powerful, you rip me to shreds, but I love you. I cannot wait for Reckless. Next, we have Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. This book, it was there. This was my first Abby Jimenez book, and I was going into this book kind of expecting it, well, not really expecting it to be light and fluffy, because I did hear someone say that this book was not going to be light and fluffy as you expect. And there was a warning literally in the beginning that's like, you know, while this is a romance, there will still be heavier topics throughout this book, and I just don't know if I was just trying to be delusional and not expect that, but there was some pretty heavy topics. So I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I just don't really know why I didn't love this book like everybody else has. I guess I really just wasn't in the mood for such a heavy book, but I still really loved it in the end. And definitely, if you were planning to read this book, just know it is real, it is raw. I did still like this book though, it just wasn't a favorite. And then the very last book that I read in April is The Wishing Game. I have to hold it like this because the library that I got it from puts their stuff on the front. So this is The Wishing Game. This book also has another sad undertone. The theme, the overarching theme of The Wishing Game is quite literally what it is like going through life as an adult. As an adult, your life isn't going to be like the fairy tales that you read about. That was so sad and so hurtful to me because I was one of those kids who wanted the fairy tale life, and that's just not what the real world is. And that's what this book tackles. But don't get me wrong, it was still interesting and it still felt really fun. I really enjoyed the plot of the book. The plot of the book pretty much is that Lucy is wanting to adopt Christopher. Lucy, when she was younger, didn't really have a good childhood. Her parents didn't really want to pay attention to her. Her parents were very toxic people. It did have a really sad undertone, but the book was still a pretty happy book for the most part. I was very happy with how the book ended. It did kind of still end on a sad note, I'm not gonna lie, but I was still really happy with how the book ended overall, and I really enjoyed this book. I gave this book in the end 4 out of 5, or 4.5 out of 5 stars. I'm so glad that I picked this book up and I loved it so much. That is the video. That is every single book that I read in March and April. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and also a big thank you to you guys for 300 subscribers. We surpassed 300 subscribers, and you guys are already so good to me and so kind. I am just so very thankful for the community that I already see we are building. I cannot wait to see what the future holds with you guys and with my channel. My dream is to honestly be able to quit my full-time job and do YouTube full-time, so hopefully we will one day get there. So anyways, comment down below what you guys read in March and April. Did you guys have any books that you loved? Did you have any books that you know, maybe didn't so much love? Let's talk about them. And if you guys read any of the books that I talked about in this video, let's talk about those as well, because I feel like I had so many fun and good reads in this video, and I love to read and I love hearing about books. I love hearing people's opinions about books. You know, we may not always agree on books, but I still just love to hear what people think about books that I read. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, or the bestie button as we're calling it now. Make sure you tap that subscribe button and also tap that post notification bell so you will not miss any time that I upload. I do normally try to upload on Sunday at 6 p.m. EST, but I may have something in the works of possibly uploading more throughout the week. So, but we'll have to see. We'll have to stay tuned. That's all you guys get. That's the only spoilers you guys get for what's coming to the channel. That's all I got for you guys today. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, night, evening, morning, wherever you all are in the world. I hope you're having a good time. I will see you all next time. Bye bye.